Every year, 500,000 people gather at a mountaintop in Israel for an all-night bonfire, and most of the world has no idea why. They come from Brooklyn and Buenos Aires. They come from London and Los Angeles. They come from small towns in Morocco and crowded streets in Antwerp. They sleep in fields and on hillsides, wrapped in coats against the Galilean night. They carry their children on their shoulders. They sing until their voices break. And they weep strangers, weeping beside strangers in the kind of open, unguarded way that human beings rarely allow themselves to weep in the daylight hours of ordinary life. What is this place? And what is it that pulls them there with such ferocious, ancient magnetism? The mountain is called Meron. It stands in the upper Galilee of northern Israel. A rugged, beautiful peak that has held a cemetery and a tomb and a synagogue in the memory of the sacred for nearly 2,000 years. The fire that burns there each spring is called a hadlakah, a lighting. And the reason behind it all is a man who lived in the 2nd century of the Common Era. A man who was sentenced to death for the crime of telling the truth, who hid underground for over a decade, who emerged from that darkness carrying secrets that would reshape the entire spiritual map of the Western world. A man whose name you may never have heard, whose story you were almost certainly never taught in any school, and whose presence on that mountaintop, according to millions of devoted souls who make the pilgrimage year after year, is as real on that night as it was the day he was buried there. I want to tell you that story today. All of it, not the surface version, not the tourist brochure summary, the full, extraordinary, almost incomprehensible truth of who this man was, what he discovered inside a cave in the Galilean hills, and why the fire that burns on that mountain in the spring of every year carries something inside it that the rational mind struggles to contain and the searching soul immediately recognizes. Because here is what I have learned. After many years of studying this tradition, the bonfire at Meron is not a memorial. It is not a cultural abbot. It is not nostalgia dressed up in torchlight. It is a transmission, a living transmission, and the question is not whether you believe in what that means. The question is whether you are willing to stand close enough to the fire to feel what it carries. So before we go any further, if this kind of teaching reaches something inside you, if there is a part of you that has always felt, even without being able to say it clearly, that the visible world is thinner than the one behind it, that there is more going on than what appears, I want you to do something right now. Hit that like button, and then leave a comment below with these 5 words. My fire cannot go out, not as a wish, not as a hope, not even as a prayer, as a declaration, as a statement of something you already know to be true in your bones, even when the darkness tells you otherwise. Subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications so that none of what we explore here together gets lost along the way. Now, let us begin. The year is somewhere in the 2nd century of the Common Era. The Roman Empire controls the land of Israel with an iron grip that it wraps in silk, offering roads, aqueducts, marketplaces, bathhouses, all the visible gifts of an advanced civilization, while underneath those gifts runs a campaign designed to dissolve the Jewish people's connection to their God, their Torah, their collective memory, their very identity as a people. A group of rabbis are gathered, discussing the Roman presence and its impact on Jewish life. One of them, a man named Yehuda, speaks appreciatively of what Rome has built. The markets are good. The bridges are good. The bathhouses are good. They benefit everyone. Another rabbi at the table, a man named Yossi, stays quiet. He understands the political situation. He understands the cost of speaking carelessly. But the third man at the table cannot stay quiet. He never could. His name is Shimon bar Yochai. And he says something that will change the course of his entire life. He says that everything the Romans built, they built for themselves. The markets were established for purposes of corruption and moral degradation. The bridges were built to collect tolls from those who crossed them. The bathhouses were made to pamper their own bodies. He says this plainly, in front of witnesses, without calculation or apology. And someone in that room reports what Shimon said to the Roman authorities. The Talmud records this man's name as Yehuda ben Gerim, which means Yehuda, the son of converts. History does not treat him kindly. The sentence that comes back is a death sentence. Listen to me carefully. Not a fine, not exile, not imprisonment, death. And so Shimon bar Yochai, known to generations of mystics and students by the Hebrew acronym Rashbi, does what a man does when the empire has decided that his words are too dangerous and his fire too bright to be allowed to continue. He runs. He takes his son with him, a young man named Eleazar, who is in danger by association and by blood, and they find a cave in the hillsides near the village of Pekiin in the Upper Galilee, and they disappear inside it, into the dark, into the silence, into something that has no comfortable name in ordinary language, but that every human soul recognizes the moment it arrives, the radical aloneness that comes when everything familiar has been stripped away and there is nothing left between you and the core of who you are. Now stop right there. I want you to really sit with this image, not as a religious story from a distant time, as a human reality that is closer to your own experience than you might initially want to admit. You are a man of extraordinary learning, extraordinary energy, extraordinary conviction. You have spent your entire adult life in public teaching, debating, arguing with emperors and sages and colleagues with equal intensity. You are, by any measure, someone for whom engagement with the world is not merely a preference, but a fundamental mode of being. You have sat at the feet of one of the greatest teachers in the history of your people, a man named Rabbi Akiva, whose own story of transformation from illiterate shepherd to master of Torah is told as one of the great examples of what a human being is capable of becoming. You have been shaped by his fire and you carry it. You have built relationships and a reputation and a way of being in the world that is entirely dependent on other people. And now you are inside a cave. Just you and your son, no colleagues, no students, no debate partners, no scrolls delivered by courier, no news from the outside world, no marketplace gossip, no political intrigue, no festival days in the city, no laughter at a communal table, just stone walls on all sides, the sound of your own breathing, and the very specific psychological weight that presses on a human being when they are completely, radically, utterly removed from every context in which they previously understood themselves to exist. I want to ask you something. Are you tired of a silence in your life that you did not choose? Have you ever found yourself in your own version of a cave, a hospital waiting room that becomes a kind of permanent address? Or a bedroom whose four walls you know so well, you can trace every crack in the ceiling from memory? Or a grief so total that even among people who love you, you are completely alone inside it and wondered whether anything good could possibly grow in a place this dark? Do you feel right now, at this moment, like you are waiting for a sentence you did not deserve to simply be lifted so your actual life can resume? And if you are watching this right now while carrying the specific modern grief of having done everything right, worked hard, stayed honest, treated people well, showed up when it would have been easier to disappear, and still finding yourself in a cave you did not plan for and cannot yet see the exit from, then this teaching is for you in a way that goes beyond comfort. Because the tradition of Meron does not say be patient and everything will work out. The tradition of Meron says something much harder and much more true. It says the cave is not happening to you. The cave is happening in you. And what happens in you is the only thing that was ever fully yours to determine. Because the Talmud does not rush past what happens inside that cave. It does not spare us the difficulty. The Talmud, which is the record of the Jewish people's most honest, most unsentimental, most relentlessly truthful wrestling with God and life and the nature of reality, does not lie about the hard parts of the most important stories. The Rashbi and his son are inside that cave for 12 years. The Talmud records that a carob tree miraculously grows outside the cave entrance, providing them with fruit to eat, and that a spring of fresh water rises from the ground nearby, giving them something to drink. In order to preserve their garments for the times when they emerge to pray, they remove their clothing at other times and bury themselves in the sand up to their necks. And in that stripped down, completely exposed, fundamentally humbled position, they study Torah, day after day, season after season, year after year, 12 years. I want you to hear how long that is in human terms. 12 years ago, from wherever you are standing today, think about what your life looked like 12 years ago. The face that was younger in the mirror, the relationships that have since shifted, the fears you no longer carry and the ones that have replaced them, the person you were then and the person you are now, and the enormous, irreversible, extraordinary distance between those two people. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai lived the equivalent of that distance inside a cave, buried in sand, sustained by miraculous provisions, studying the deepest available text with the full, uninterrupted intensity of a mind that had nowhere else to go and nothing else to do. At the end of 12 years, the word comes that the Roman emperor has died. The death sentence has been lifted. Elijah the prophet arrives at the mouth of the cave with the news, and the Rashbi and his son step out into the world again. The Talmud tells us what happens next with almost uncomfortable directness. They emerge. They see farmers in the fields, plowing and sowing, doing the ordinary, irreplaceable work of keeping people fed and alive. And Rabbi Shimon sees it, and something in him, something that has been burning at an intensity that the ordinary world cannot withstand, turns its gaze on those farmers. And wherever his eyes fall, things begin to burn. A voice comes from heaven. The Talmud records it exactly. Did you come out of the cave to destroy my world? Go back. So they go back for another 12 months, and this is the moment in the story that most people skip over because it is uncomfortable, because it says something that our current understanding of spiritual progress does not easily accommodate. It says that emerging from the cave was not enough. It says that even the extraordinary accomplishment of 12 years of unbroken sacred study inside a darkness that would have broken most people, even that was not sufficient preparation for what the Rashbi would become. He needed to go back, not because he failed, not because his learning was inadequate, but because the fire he had developed in the first cave was a fire that could only burn. It had not yet learned to also heal. It had not yet been refined into the kind of warmth that can be in the world without consuming everything around it. The second cave is the refinement. And when they finally emerge from the second cave, the Talmud says something that is to my ear one of the most beautiful sentences in the entire tradition. It says, wherever his son, Rabbi Elazar, would strike, Rabbi Shimon would heal. The son still had the burning gaze. The father had passed through something that transformed the burning into light. Not less fire, not diminished fire. Fire that had become capable of illuminating without consuming. Fire that had learned compassion as its operating principle rather than judgment. That transformation is what the bonfires at Meron celebrate. Not a death, a transformation. Now I need to tell you about what was born in that cave. Because this is the part of the story that most people have never been told. And it is the part that explains why hundreds of thousands of people still climb that mountain every year with the specific urgency of people who are not simply attending a cultural event, but going to receive something they cannot get anywhere else. What grew in that cave was the Zohar. Let me say that word properly. Zohar. In Hebrew, it means radiance, or brilliance, or the shining light that emanates from something whose luminosity is almost too great for the human eye to hold steadily. And the Zohar, the book that carries that name, is the central text of Kabbalah, the mystical tradition at the heart of Jewish spirituality. A document so layered and so strange and so saturated with light that great scholars have spent entire lifetimes simply trying to read one portion of it with genuine understanding. The tradition holds that what Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai discovered during those 12 years in the cave, and then in the additional months of the second cave, was nothing less than the inner architecture of reality itself. The secrets of how the divine light moves through the worlds, how the soul is structured and what it is made of and where it comes from. How prayer actually functions as a mechanism, not merely as petition. How human action ripples through dimensions that are entirely invisible to the physical eye, but are, in the Kabbalistic understanding, more fundamentally real than the visible ones. All of that poured out of him, in the final period of his life, into what became the Zohar. His closest student, Rabbi Abba, served as the scribe. His son Rabbi Elazar reviewed and confirmed the teachings. A small, devoted circle of companions held the words in their hearts as guardians hold sacred fire carefully. With full awareness of what they were carrying, they knew what it was. They knew they had received something that would outlast them by centuries, possibly by millennia. They were right. The text that emerged from Shimon bar Yochai's life did not appear publicly for more than 1,000 years. It circulated in fragments, in whispers, in the careful hands of initiates who understood that some forms of light require a particular kind of darkness in which to be properly received. Then in the 13th century, in Spain, a Kabbalist and scholar named Moses de Leon began to circulate manuscripts containing the Zohar's teachings. And the world of Jewish spirituality was permanently altered by what came into the light. The scholarly debate about the Zohar's origins is genuine and ongoing and interesting, and we will not resolve it here today. What matters for our purposes, what matters for anyone standing at the bonfire at Meron or sitting with a candle in the middle of a difficult night anywhere on earth, is this single irreducible fact. The Zohar changed everything. It gave the tradition a language for the inner life that had not existed in that form before. It gave the Jewish people scattered across centuries of exile and persecution and the specific spiritual homesickness of a people forced to live perpetually far from the center, a map that insisted the darkness was not ultimate, that behind every exile there is a deeper homecoming being prepared, that behind every silence there is a more profound word trying to emerge, that the light was not lost but hidden, and that hidden light is always more powerful than extinguished light, because hidden light is still burning. It says the fire never goes out. And so, Let me take you deeper into the Zohar for a moment, because the word itself deserves more than a quick passing mention. Zohar, radiance. There is a verse in the book of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 3, that reads in the original Hebrew, "And the wise shall shine like the radiance of the heavens, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars, forever and ever." The word the prophet Daniel uses for that shining, that word is Zohar. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's students chose it deliberately as the title for the great work that emerged from his life. They were saying, this is the shining, this is what the wise man's light looks like when it is finally released into the world. The Zohar is written primarily in Aramaic, the spoken language of the Jewish people in the land of Israel during the period of the Talmud. But the Aramaic of the Zohar is not ordinary Aramaic. It is a language within a language, a kind of spiritual code in which the words operate on multiple levels simultaneously. The surface meaning and the mystical meaning and the levels beneath, both of those existing together in the same sentence. Scholars who have devoted their lives to it describe the experience of studying the Zohar as fundamentally unlike studying any other text. It does not simply convey information. It enacts something. It creates a particular state in the reader, a heightened attentiveness, a sense of moving deeper into something that does not have a visible bottom. The Zohar contains multiple sections. The Idra Rabbah, the Greater Assembly, in which Rabbi Shimon convenes his circle to reveal the deepest secrets of the divine configurations. During the Idra Rabbah, 3 of the disciples are overwhelmed by the intensity of what they receive and depart from this world entirely. According to the account in the Zohar, Rabbi Yossi bar Yaakov, Rabbi Chezkiah bar Rav, and Rabbi Yisa fill with divine light, and their souls ascend during the assembly itself. Consider what that says about what was being transmitted in that room. And then there is the Idra Zuda, the lesser assembly, the account of Rabbi Shimon's last night in this world. His body is failing. His remaining disciples are gathered, and rather than retreat into silence, Rabbi Shimon teaches for hours. He pours out what the text calls the most concealed things, the secrets he has been holding back, even from his closest students. And at the end, as he finishes speaking, a great light fills the room. Fire blazes outside. The disciples cannot approach. When the light finally lifts, Rabbi Shimon has passed from this world, not dragged out of it, but ascending on the very radiance of what he had just transmitted. This is why the bonfire burns at Meron. It is not a memorial. It is a reenactment of that ascent. It is a participation, year after year, in the event that Rabbi Shimon's entire life was always moving toward. Now, I want to speak about something that most explanations of Meron overlook entirely: the relationship between concealment and revelation, between what is hidden and what is eventually released. The Zohar was concealed for centuries. Rabbi Shimon did not publish it. He transmitted it to a small circle, and then it went underground into the collective memory of the tradition, carried in fragments and whispers until the world was ready to receive it. The teachers of the Kabbalah teach that this pattern, concealment followed by revelation, is not accidental. It is the fundamental structure of how light moves through existence. The light that was present before creation, what the tradition calls the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light, was too intense to be received directly. It had to be withdrawn, concealed, hidden behind layers, so that finite beings could develop into vessels capable of receiving what they could not receive at the beginning. The hiding of the light is an act of love. The concealment of what is most brilliant is not a deprivation. It is a preparation. Your cave is that preparation. The circumstances that are currently concealing the full expression of who you are, the restrictions, the waiting, the enforced patience, the reduced circumstances that have been pressing on you. Those are not punishments. They are arrangements. They are the conditions in which something is being developed in you that could not be developed any other way. Hold that not as a comfort but as information. When you are in the darkness, you are not simply waiting for it to end. You are an active production of something the world will eventually need to receive from you. The silence is the sound of creation in process. What emerges from your cave will carry the specific signature of your specific darkness, which is another way of saying it will carry something no one else can carry. Because no one else has been in your cave, you understand now why they come to Meron in such extraordinary numbers. The lighting of the great bonfire on Lag BaOmer on the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer, the day that tradition holds as the anniversary of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's passing from this world, is not mourning. It is the precise opposite of mourning. The tradition records that Rabbi Shimon himself requested that his death be marked with rejoicing. Because in the Kabbalistic understanding of what happens when a soul departs this world, the death of a righteous and fully realized person is not the extinguishing of their light. It is the release of it. It is the moment when everything they held within them during a life of labor and teaching and suffering and discovery and love, all of that opens outward and becomes available. Not archived, available actively, continuously, presently available to any soul willing to draw close enough to receive it. The bonfire at Meron is that reception. A hilula, a celebration of the soul's release into full radiance. A gathering of hundreds of thousands of people who have come across extraordinary distances to say, with their physical presence, that they believe the fire is still burning and they want to stand in its warmth. Now let me tell you what those hundreds of thousands of people actually do on that mountain on that night. Because the details matter. The details are where the sacred lives. They arrive on foot and by bus and by car, streaming up the roads that wind toward the peak in the Galilee. When the pilgrimage is open and unrestricted, the numbers that gather are genuinely staggering in the years before various restrictions, limited attendance. Reports from Meron spoke of hundreds of thousands of people present across the mountain and the surrounding region over the course of the night's celebrations. Hasidic families dressed in the distinctive clothing of their particular dynasties. Fathers with their young sons on their shoulders, the children wearing small white shirts and wide eyes, and the expression of people who have been told all their lives that this night is different from all other nights. Sephardic families from North Africa and the Middle East, whose tradition of visiting the tomb of the Rashbi stretches so far back into their family histories that they cannot name when it began. Secular Israelis who do not keep Shabbat and do not pray daily, but who feel something pull them to Meron each year with a force they genuinely cannot explain in the language of secular life. So they stop trying to explain it and simply go. The central ceremony is the hadlakah, the lighting. A great bonfire is kindled at the site of Rabbi Shimon's tomb by a recognized spiritual leader. And from that central flame, the fire spreads outward. Smaller bonfires ignite across the mountain, across the surrounding hillsides, down into the valleys below. Seen from a distance, the whole region looks like it has erupted into constellations of earthly fire, answering some call from the stars. Families perform the upsharon, the ceremony of the first haircut for 3-year-old boys at Meron on this night. Because the tradition holds that the spiritual energy concentrated at this place and on this day carries a particular blessing for children who are entering the age of language and consciousness and the beginning of formal learning. Imagine that. Parents bringing their young sons to a mountaintop bonfire in the Galilean night so that the first cutting of the child's hair, a moment of transition, of emergence into a new stage of being, happens in the presence of this particular fire. And throughout all of it, in the singing and the dancing and the praying and the embracing of strangers as easily as family, there is the weeping. I want to come back to this. The weeping that happens at Meron is not performative. You cannot fake the kind of release that overtakes certain people in the presence of that tomb and that fire. Something in the encounter between a living human soul carrying whatever it carries, the accumulated weight of years, the grief of loss, the longing for something they cannot name, the specific exhaustion of a life that has not yet opened into what it was supposed to become. Something in that encounter with the concentrated spiritual legacy of a man who went all the way down into the dark and all the way back up. Carrying light just breaks something open. The ordinary defenses stop working. Whatever has been held too tightly gets released. This is not sentimentality. The great teachers of this tradition did not confuse emotion with truth, and neither should we. But they also did not mistake the absence of emotion for spiritual sophistication. The weeping at Meron is information. It is the body's recognition of something real before the mind has found the words for it. Now, I want to speak directly to you, not to a general audience. To you, specifically, watching this right now, I want to tell you what the story of Meron teaches about the caves in your own life. The first teaching is this: the cave is never an accident. The Roman sentence that drove Rabbi Shimon underground was not a mistake in the story, a tragedy to be mourned or an obstacle to be overcome before the real story could begin. It was the story. Every tradition that has ever seriously grappled with the nature of human spiritual development carries some version of this truth. The descent precedes the ascent. The stripping away precedes the filling. The forced surrender of everything you thought you needed precedes the discovery of what you actually are. If you are in a period of your life right now that feels like isolation, like everything external has been removed, like you are buried to your neck in something you did not choose, like the world you knew has contracted down to the dimensions of a cave, the tradition of Meron does not tell you that this is punishment. It tells you that something is being prepared inside you that could not have been prepared under any other conditions. Not a comfort, not an easy promise, a structural truth. Because the tradition of Meron is not offering you an explanation. It is offering you a framework, a way of standing inside your own life that transforms what the darkness means without lying about its difficulty. That is rarer and more valuable than comfort. That is what real wisdom actually does, that the teachers of this tradition have observed, confirmed, and transmitted across nearly 2,000 years of human experience in every variety of difficulty that history has produced. The second teaching is this: the fire that comes out of the cave is a different fire than the one that went in. Rabbi Shimon went into the cave as a man of extraordinary intellectual intensity and fierce, burning conviction. He came out the first time still on fire, but fire that consumed rather than illuminated. He had to go back. He had to return to the cave for another 12 months of refinement, and when he finally emerged the second time, the fire had been transformed. It could still burn, but it could also heal. It had acquired something that all the studying in the world cannot give you on its own: the capacity for compassion that comes only from truly prolonged surrender. If you are in a place right now where your fire, your longing, your intensity, your refusal to accept less than what you know you were made for is burning you from the inside rather than illuminating the people around you, then you are in the second cave, the cave you go back to willingly. And the second cave is not failure. It is not weakness. It is the most advanced part of the process. The third teaching comes from the Idrazuta, the record of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's final night in this world. Preserved in the Zohar itself, on his deathbed, surrounded by his closest disciples, Rabbi Shimon teaches through the night. He pours out the remaining secrets he has been holding, and the account records him saying that he does not wish to leave this world having failed to fulfill his task. He will not depart with his light still sealed inside him. He will transmit everything. Whatever you discover in your cave does not belong to you alone. The things you learn in your darkness, the particular understanding of certain kinds of pain that only people who have experienced them can carry, the specific wisdom that emerges from having been in the place where everything is stripped away and you find out what remains that is not private property. That is the inheritance of everyone who is still in the dark and needs to know it is possible to emerge carrying light. Start watching for who needs what you have been learning. And now here is the practice. Here is the thing you can do regardless of whether you are in Israel or Indonesia. Regardless of whether you have ever heard of Lag Ba Omer before today, on any night when the weight of your particular cave feels heaviest, and you know the nights I am talking about. The 3 a.m. nights, the nights when the narratives you usually tell yourself about the meaning of your life simply refuse to function. When you are awake in the dark and the darkness has a texture and a weight on those nights, do this. Light a real candle, not an electric light. A flame, a small, physical, impermanent, alive, responsive flame that moves when you breathe near it and reminds you in its very nature that fire is always in motion, always changing, always consuming something to maintain its light. Set the candle where you can sit with it, and before you say anything or ask for anything or bring any request, simply look at the flame for 60 uninterrupted seconds. Do not try to think spiritual thoughts. Do not try to feel something in particular. Just look. Give the flame 60 seconds of your full, unhurried attention, and then say these 3 things out loud, in your own voice, in your own language. First, I am not lost. I am in the cave. Second, the darkness is not the end of my story. It is the middle of it. Third, whatever was placed in me in the dark is already preparing to burn. Then sit with the flame a while longer. Let it burn. If something rises in you, a memory that seems unconnected, a grief that has been waiting for permission, a word or an image that does not make immediate logical sense, do not push it away. Do not analyze it. Let the aperture be open. Let it breathe. Do this practice for 5 nights. Not because 5 is a mystically correct number, but because 1 night is easy to dismiss as a mood, and 30 is too long a first commitment. 5 nights is enough to establish real contact with whatever inside you has been waiting underground for the right conditions to emerge. This is not superstition. This is an invitation to treat your inner life with the same seriousness that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai treated his, not because you are in a cave of the same magnitude, but because the principle is identical. Darkness is preparation. Silence is where the real words form. The stripping away is always followed by something that would not have been possible without it. And someone watching this right now is in a place so dark that the idea of 5 candles over 5 nights sounds almost like a joke. You have been in your cave so long that you have stopped measuring the time. You came to this video not because you were looking for it, but because something brought you here on a night when you needed exactly this and could not have told anyone what exactly this was. You know this is for you, not for a general viewer. For you, the fire at Meron is for you. The transmission that has been moving from Rashbi's cave to his disciples to the Zohar, to every teacher who has carried it forward across 18 centuries of human history and every darkness that history has contained, that transmission is available to you tonight, wherever you are, whatever cave you are in, however buried in sand you may feel. The carob tree will appear, the spring will rise. This is not a metaphor offered to comfort you. This is the recorded testimony of a tradition that has watched this happen in specific human lives under specific impossible conditions for generation after generation after generation. The provision comes. The light comes, not when you stop needing the cave, but when you have received everything the cave was designed to give you. There is one more thing I want to give you before we close. One more layer of the Meron teaching that the surface explanations rarely reach. It is about the children. On the night of Lag BaOmer at Meron, thousands of 3-year-old boys received their first haircut. The Upshurin. In the Kabbalistic tradition, the first 3 years of a child's life are a kind of sacred concealment. The hair is not cut. The child grows in a kind of protected wildness, not yet pruned or shaped by the external world's expectations. And then, at 3, the age when language begins to flower into full sentences, when consciousness is arriving at its first genuine selfhood, when the child begins to have an inner life that is recognizably their own, the hair is cut, the child is formally welcomed into the world of Torah and language and learning. The concealment phase ends, the revelation phase begins. Parents bring their children to Meron for this ceremony precisely because they want the first shaping of their child's conscious life to happen in the presence of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's fire. They want the transition from concealment to revelation to happen at the place where that transition is most concentrated in the tradition's collective memory. Think about what that means. The parents are saying, my child has been in their own kind of cave for 3 years. They have been developing in protected wildness, growing what they are going to be. And now we bring them to the fire, and we make the first deliberate cut, and we welcome them into the world of meaning and transmission. We want the first words of their formal learning to be spoken in the light of this particular flame. That is what Meron is doing at its deepest level. It is holding a space where the transition from hiddenness to revelation can happen in the most concentrated field of that energy available on earth. Not just for 3-year-old boys. For every soul that arrives there carrying something that has been concealed long enough and is ready to emerge. Every year, that mountain holds that possibility. Every year, the fire is lit and the space opens. And the souls that gather there, whether they understand all of this theology or none of it, whether they come with deep learning or simply with longing, carry something back down the mountain with them that they did not carry up. A transmission, a piece of the fire, something to tend. This is what the ancient traditions understood, that the modern world has mostly forgotten the sacred is not primarily a matter of individual private belief. It is a matter of transmission. It moves from person to person, from generation to generation, from fire to fire, kept alive by the willingness of human beings to stand close enough to something luminous to carry some of that light with them when they leave. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was the most concentrated example in the tradition of what a human being looks like when they commit fully to being a vessel for that transmission. He gave up everything for the darkness that produced the light, and then he gave the light away. He did not keep it. He transmitted it. And the fire at Meron burns every year to remind the world that this is still possible, that human beings are still capable of this depth of commitment and this depth of generosity, that the cave still produces rabbis, that the darkness still makes Zohars, that the fire still transmits from soul to soul to soul across centuries and continents and the vast distances of human history. You are in that chain of transmission right now. Not by accident. You found this teaching because something in you recognized that it was time to receive something, and what you received today, you will carry somewhere. You will transmit it, knowingly or unknowingly, in the way you speak to someone who is struggling, in the quality of presence you bring to a conversation at 3 a.m, in the candle you light on the night when someone you love is in their own cave and does not know what you now know. The fire is looking for carriers. You are one of them. So here is what I want you to carry out of this teaching today. The cave is preparation. Whatever is stripping you, silencing you, isolating you from the life you thought you were going to live, it is not punishment. It is a cave. And caves make rabbis. Go back willingly if you must. The second descent is not failure. It is refinement. The fire that has learned to both burn and heal is infinitely more powerful than fire that can only burn. Your discoveries belong to the world. Whatever you are learning in the dark is meant to be transmitted. Start looking for who is in the cave you just left. The flame is always there, even under the sand, even in the longest night. And the bonfire at Meron, the fire that has been lit on that mountain to celebrate the life and the light of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai for centuries, that fire burns for every soul willing to receive what it carries. No passport required. No pedigree required. Only the willingness to acknowledge that the fire in you is real and worth protecting. If this teaching has reached something in you today, come back to the comments. Leave those words again. My fire cannot go out. Say them for yourself. Say them for the person you know who is in the darkest part of their cave right now and does not know what you now know, that the darkness is the middle of the story, not the end of it. Declare it. Hold nothing back. Let the declaration be the first small flame. And subscribe to this channel. Turn on notifications. We are going to keep going deeper together. Because the mountain at Meron is one door into a tradition so vast and so luminous and so relentlessly relevant to the human experience that we could spend a lifetime at its threshold and still be discovering something new. May the fire that burns each year at the summit of Meron find its way to wherever you are tonight. May the light that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai carried out of his cave in the Galilean hills nearly 2,000 years ago and never once put down the light that he poured into his students in the final hours of his life, that they preserved and transmitted into a book that has outlasted every empire that tried to silence it. May that light recognize itself in the flame that is already burning in you. May your cave become your Zohar. May your descent become your radiance. May every silence in your life become a place where something extraordinary is being refined in the dark. The fire at Meron has never gone out, and neither will yours. Go tend your flame. The world is waiting for what emerges from your cave.